The new in-game penalty for committing a flop will be in effect on a 1-year trial basis. A flop is defined as a physical act that reasonably appears to be intended to cause the game officials to call a foul on another player. Key elements of the new flopping rule are: when an official calls a flop, the player will be charged with a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul, and the opposing team will be awarded one free throw attempt, which can be attempted by any player who is in the game when the technical foul is assessed. As the penalty is a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul, a player cannot be ejected from a game based on one or more flopping violations. Referees will not be required to stop live play to call a flopping violation. The officials will wait until the next neutral opportunity to stop live play to administer the flopping penalty. It is possible that the officials could call both a foul and a flopping violation on the same play. The following video clips show examples that would result in a flop being called by the game officials under the new in-game flopping rule. On this first example, the highlighted defender, Marcus Smart, is defending James Harden, but following minimal contact with Harden, Smart launched himself backwards, falling to the floor while also throwing his arms up in an exaggerated and theatrical manner that was inconsistent with the nature of the contact. As the reaction is both exaggerated and theatrical, a flop would be called here, and a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul would be assessed. On this next example, the highlighted defender, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, is defending the dribbler, Ja Morant, but following minimal contact with Morant, Caldwell-Pope falls backwards and spins his body around in a manner that was inconsistent with the contact on the play. As the reaction here is both exaggerated and theatrical, a flop would be called and a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul would be assessed. Now, let's look at a flop that occurs in the post area. Here, the highlighted defender, Rudy Gobert, is defending the offensive player, Domantas Sabonis, but Gobert, after a brief delay, falls to the floor in a manner that is inconsistent with the nature of the contact. As the reaction here is secondary, as well as exaggerated and theatrical, a flop would be called and a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul would be assessed. Watch the contact on the screen on this next play closely. The highlighted defensive player, Josh Hart, is trailing his opponent, Paolo Banchero, and following minimal contact from a screen set by Wendell Carter Jr., Hart falls to the floor in an exaggerated manner that is inconsistent with the nature of the contact. A flop would be called here, and a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul would be assessed. Another example of a flop by a defensive player can be seen here. The highlighted defensive player, Jared Vanderbilt, reacts to minimal contact with the dribbler, Steph Curry, by theatrically throwing his right arm into the air, and he then falls to the floor in an exaggerated manner. Vanderbilt's reaction is inconsistent with the nature of the contact on the play, and a flop would be called, and a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul would be assessed. Now let's review flops by offensive players that will be penalized. The highlighted offensive player, Jaden Ivey, attempts a three-point field goal, but he then falls to the floor in a manner that is inconsistent with the minimal hand contact made by the defender, Luguentz Dort. As the reaction here is both exaggerated and theatrical, a flop would be called, and a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul would be assessed. Another example of a flop by an offensive player can be seen here. The highlighted offensive player, Jimmy Butler, reacts in an exaggerated manner to the contact from the defensive player, Romeo Langford, by moving towards midcourt in a direction inconsistent with the contact. And while Langford was called for a defensive foul on this play, a flop would be assessed and a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul would be penalized. Our final example of a flop that would be penalized can be seen on this rebounding example. The highlighted player, Alperen Şengün, reacts to minimal contact by launching himself backwards and falling to the floor. Şengün's reaction was secondary and exaggerated and also could have resulted in an injury. A flop would be called and a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul would be assessed.